2011, and this is a 1995 Subaru Legacy L. I may actually have listed it as a Legacy Brighton in my last video, but research in the past week has actually shown me that the car is a Legacy L, which is a step up from the Brighton, and the car is misbadged. Anyhow, my latest problem. Last week, after the CV axle and steering rack boot work, I took the car for tires and inspection, and the car did just fine. And then Monday, I decided to take it for my first day of commuting, and I was hoping that my months of transportation hell would be over. Well, I got into work just fine, and then I was leaving the city on Monday, and I got about a third of the way home when I lost my brakes. I actually had to hit the brakes, and all of a sudden they felt, noticeably soft. I hit them again and realized it wasn't my imagination, so I pulled over to the side of the road, popped the hood, and I saw that the car was losing fluid. I was at a gas station, so I bought more fluid, added it, pumped the brakes a couple of times to see what would happen, and it kept losing the fluid, so called a tow truck, brought me home, and I was commuting in the van again for the rest of the week. So one evening this week, I put the car up on jack stands and had my wife hit the brake pedal, and eventually I found the leak, which is one of the steel lines here in the back, and I'll show you where it's leaking. Basically, my plan is to make a splice here inside the car and run two new lines out to the rear wheels, and I'll show you exactly why I'm going to splice here in the car instead of the connector underneath the car. You can see right here, this is where the brake lines run through the car and exit under the back seat, and you can see some corrosion there, which really doesn't worry me too much, but this one looks pretty rotten right here. Who knows how bad it really is. And if you give me a second, I'll get under the car here, show you where the leak is. So, you can see everything here that's kind of moist, that's all brake fluid. The leak is actually in the right rear brake line. Right here, it's right above where the gas tank filler is, right above the rear subframe. So, here's where the steel line exits and meets the flex hose. So, I already bought new flex hoses. I'll install them today. Sorry about that. Looks like I hit the pause button by accident. Anyhow, I got new flex hoses. I'm going to install those today. It's going to take me a while to, because of all the rust, to disconnect everything, but here is the here's the connector underneath the car, and you can see everything's pretty badly corroded here too. I mean, so much so that it actually does worry me. And so I'm probably just going to disconnect everything, pull the lines inside the car, make some splices and connections there, then run two new steel lines out here to the rear calipers. And because of the way Subaru routed everything here, kind of tucked behind everything, I don't want to have to remove the rear subframe and gas tank, so I'm actually going to reroute the lines, which shouldn't cause a problem. They're just not going to be where they originally were, so I'll have to figure out the best way to do that. I think for the driver's side rear, I'm gonna run the line here up above this cross member here, which should keep it away from anything moving and far enough away from the exhaust. As for the passenger side line, I'll probably keep it fairly close to where it originally was, tucked. I'll tuck it as best I can here behind the gas tank and just exit here and have it mount by the flex hose. Anyhow, that's all for now. and I'll probably won't give a step-by-step here. There's plenty of how-tos on YouTube with respect to flaring brake line, and I really don't want to slow the job down here, but I will, if I can, do a video of the results. Sunday, March 27, 2011. Anyhow, I'm still at work on this. Just to give you a brief update, I gave you kind of an assessment of the condition of everything yesterday, and I pretty much worked throughout the day yesterday and through a good portion of the late morning today. Yesterday, actually the bulk of what I was doing was freeing up the bleeder screws on the calipers, because because pretty much 3 out of 4 of them were seized in hopelessly, and I of course have a fairly long history of accidentally shearing them off. So anyhow, I got them all freed up, and I wanted to do that first because I didn't want to do all this brake work and then, you know, not be able to bleed the dry lines. I mean, if I got all the new parts in, then I couldn't open the bleeder screws to, you know, to get the fluid to flow. Would have been all pointless. So I started with the bleeder screws and all the other connections. You can see actually on the passenger side of the car here, I actually had to replace both bleeder screws. This one I was able to get out okay, but for whatever reason, the hole through which the fluid would flow was hopelessly rusted over, so I had to get a new screw in there. Thankfully, I had 2 brand new bleeder screws from a previous job that I hadn't used, and they did fit, so 2 of these on the passenger side of the car. I would have replaced all 4, but I didn't have 4. There's all the 2 original ones are on the driver's side. And I was freeing up other connections, like right here. This, of course, is the end of the really problematic steel line, and you can see it's disconnected there. And you can see I heated the bottom of the connection there to disconnect it, which in the end really didn't help much because it wasn't stuck. And unfortunately, I ruined the hose in the process. It's not completely disconnected, but you can see right there the heat damage just from heating that connector. So you want to be really, really careful anytime you use heat anywhere near the flex hoses. Now, thankfully, I did buy 4 brand new flex hoses. I'll probably just replace the rears. I also got to look at the front of the car. The metal lines seem to be in okay shape there, so I'm not going to bother with them. I went to the auto parts store. I got lines. I borrowed a couple of tools. So, like I said, yesterday was mostly disconnecting stuff, and I kind of got back into that this morning. There's a junction, right here hidden behind that I don't feel like kneeling down. I showed you yesterday it was all rusted up. I got one of the lines completely disconnected from there, but in the end I realized that since I was going to be more or less bypassing that junction, and it was giving me a lot of trouble getting it disconnected just because of the clearance issues getting tools in there, and I wanted to cut the lines in the car. Anyway, I figured I would just go ahead and do that. So you can see right here, first I actually made a very rough cut with my Black & Decker rotary tool, which is like a Dremel, but it's just the Black & Decker brand. And then I actually used this tubing cutter I bought right here. I think I got this at AutoZone, and made clean cuts on the end there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flare those lines, put new connectors on, then flare them, and then have the connector here in the car instead of underneath. And before I did that, obviously, let me show you this piece over here. I didn't want that to be my first cut and flare, so I actually did a couple of bought this. This is a 1-foot sectional line. I just wanted a piece to practice on. You can see right there, nice new double flare on the end of that. I actually cut the original end off this line and did a couple of double flares. You can see right here. I'll show you. This right here is the original end that came on the line. I cut that off and then duplicated the flare with the tool here. Tool, of course, is on loan from AutoZone, which is nice. I didn't have to buy it. And there's plenty of YouTube videos on how to flare lines. I'm not actually going to walk you through that process. And this is actually the first flare I did. I did 2 of them for practice. And I don't think I got it quite right. You can see there it's a little jagged on the end. I tried it the second time, came out much nicer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flare the lines there in the car and then put on some new connectors and then start running the lines to the rear wheels and replace the hoses. And then once that's all in and together, I'm going to bleed the system and hopefully the car should be ready to drive then. That's all.